Okay, so this semester I had the opportunity to take a research class where we looked at fungi samples that were brought back from the boreal forest around Emma Lake, and we identified them using DNA and morphology. And we also did research papers. So I looked at the interaction between fungi and climate change, and I was interested in something I heard about fungi and carbon capture, so that sort of piqued my interest in what possible benefits there could be. All the photos are mine from various travels. They don't always match up to specific concepts of which fungi, but they're just to give an interest. And they're all of the fruiting body rather than the majority of the fungi, which is the hyphal strands. So this is an example of a fungus. And all of these are also fungi. You can see there's immense diversity in form and color and size. So fungi basics, they have nuclei which contain their DNA and chromosomes. And they're unable to produce their own energy, so they don't photosynthesize. They get their energy by absorbing it from the surrounding environment. And they usually have filamentous tubular hyphae, which they spread out into the environment and absorb nutrients through those. And they usually reproduce by spores. So there's some fungi superpowers. For one, they're small but mighty. They're almost everywhere in many different ecosystems, and even if you don't always see them, they're still there filling niche roles. And they're also very adaptable. So they're in ecosystems from the frozen Arctic tundra with permafrost to tropical rainforests and even deserts and the completely dried grains of wheat and things like that. So they can survive in many environments, and they have diverse forms and perform many diverse functions, from decomposition to carbon capture and interactions in mutualistic relationships. And they can respond to diverse ecosystem needs. So individually, there are many species of fungi that form mutualistic relationships. For example, the mycorrhizae fungi, which interact with the roots of plants and trade nutrients between them. And then collectively, fungal communities can adapt to ecosystem needs. For example, during floods, the fungi will shift from being communities of aerobic, so oxygen-needing fungi, to anaerobic fungi that can survive under the floodwaters. And then they also act as sentinels for science, as they adapt and change quickly and with observable effects that can be measured, the amount of fruiting bodies, and they're often visible in that sense. And they can also be manipulated to find experimental results. And they occupy key positions in ecosystems, often as decomposers or as transferring nutrients. And then they also can even act as in carbon capture. So as part of a system taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere through plants and into soil organic carbon, and they're part of that system. So in climate change, as you probably all know, it's a systemic increase in greenhouse gases in the atmosphere that's leading to trapping more heat and leading to warming. So some of the major effects would be melting ice, rising sea levels, ecosystem disruptions, and altered species distributions around the globe. And climate change itself has its own nefarious superpowers. So the weapons of mass destruction that it utilizes are increased global temperatures, rising sea levels, severe weather events, and the disruption of ecological and evolutionary pathways. So there's different ways that researchers have looked into fungi to see if they can be used to combat climate change or work to sort of ameliorate some of the effects. So there's one study where they found that by supporting this mutualism, they could allow trees to better survive a drought. So there's a species of tree that there's two kinds in the species. One is more insect susceptible and the other isn't. But they found that the one that was more insect susceptible actually survived the drought better because it had a different mutualism with a different type of fungi. So by facilitating these positive mutualisms, the plants can be adapted to survive in different conditions that climate change will bring. And then there's also fostering adaptive plant communities. So in the Arctic, something that's happening with warming temperatures is the increase in shrubby vegetation, and that has effects that also lead to more increased warming through changes in albedo and how much snow is trapped and things like that. So some scientists looked at ways to change the fungal community to potentially change which plant communities are existing in an area. So there's potential for sort of putting in the fungi and then hoping that plant communities will change in response to that because they're so closely intertwined. Then there's also slowing old growth forest decomposition. So old growth forests are huge net carbon sink, and normally people think of that as mostly being in the leaf litter, but in reality 50 to 70% of all the soil organic carbon that's being stored is from root matter and from root-associated fungi and microorganisms. So they discovered that by leaving the soil undisturbed in old growth forests, there is the fungi that slowed decomposition, and fungi actually could store carbon longer in the soil. And then there's even possibilities that people have researched of how to utilize the entire global soil system, mostly agricultural and degraded lands, and change the type of fungi that are there to vastly improve the carbon sequestration ability. And that could have the potential to even outweigh all of the emissions that humans are making through fossil fuel burning just by changing the fungi in the soil. But in conclusion, all of these studies are very interesting and hopeful in that there's ways that fungi can be used to help ameliorate problems caused by climate change. But ecosystems are very complex, and small changes that we make that could lead to improvements also have many side effects. So there's still lots of research needed to be done, and mostly fungi will continue to do what they do regardless of what we do, and they'll definitely have a role in combating climate change, but it may not be as easy as we would like. Yeah.